Hey friends, it's Laura with Laura B. Flosstube. Welcome or welcome back. This video is going to be covering block 13 and 14 for the Bloom Quilt Sew Along. I already have my fabrics and interfacing matched up and stacked on my machine. So we're just going to get sewing and we'll get our blocks together. If you haven't practiced your circles, then these two blocks are definitely going to give you some practice in that. So just a few reminders, I am using a Juki DX7. I have my stitch length set down to 1.8. I'm using my 1/4 inch piecing foot today, and I've layered my interfacing and fabric pieces together, and I have all of those stacked up here beside me. So we're just going to get sewing and get our blocks done. Those are all our pieces for block 13, and next up is block 14. This is the one that if you have not practiced your circles, you're gonna get in some practice now. There are 3 of them in varying sizes. I would tell you that the smallest one is probably going to be the one that causes you the most issues, and just go slow, lower your stitch length, and turn as many times as you need to. Just make sure that you're giving yourself the patience and grace necessary. All right, time to trim and turn. We're just going to trim our shapes and then we can turn them out. I have a little metal bucket here that I just put my scraps in. I've lowered my chair, so I'm a little off right now. So our first shape for this, let me swing you down here so you can see a little better, is our main flower for block 13. And just like we did for block, I think it was block 7, we're just going to cut, kind of close, snip those corners a little bit. Definitely in the concave areas, snip down too, but not through the stitch line. And just cut the shape out all the way around. Alrighty. And then we have a couple circles and a couple leaves to go. Now again, on your leaves, I cut a flat point and then down and kind of around the leaf. Again, a flat point at the end. And you're going to notice that, I leave somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch around my shapes. The more you leave, the better chance you won't have to poke through, but the better chance you also have to just have a little too much fabric bunching up, especially in those points. So you just want to try to trim those down as best you can, and go from there. So here's one of our circles. Did a lot of circles with block 13 and 14 today. So here's another one. I'm going to go ahead and cut out block 14's shapes too, so then when I go to trim, I just have all these things to trim. Now on this small circle, I actually did a little, I placed the circle over the piece of the fabric, kind of like fussy cutting, but I guess you want to say fussy appliquing. So that one's going to be super cute when I turn it out, as long as I remember that I did that and I put my flower right side up, then it will work out as I intentionally planned. But sometimes I forget, and then the quilt's together and I'm like, oh look, I didn't do that. I thought I was going to, but I didn't. Surprise. All right, so almost got all these shapes cut out, and then we will double check our guide to see if there are any shortcuts we can take. Now, if you are just joining in and you don't know what we're working on, we are working on Lori Holt's Bloom quilt. It uses her Sew Simple Shapes Set A. It was the first applique quilt she did with Sew Simple Shapes with Riley Blake. And there is a free cutting guide on the Riley Blake website. You can get that link in the first video when I'm talking about being prepared. You will also probably be able to find that on Lori Holt's blog. Now, I will put the links to block 13 and 14 in the description box below. And obviously go to her blog and for more tips and tricks and how she laid out her blocks. I am using the sew along guide, but I am kind of giving the quilt my own flavor, I guess. I am using scraps out of my stash. They are all Lori Holt fabrics, but I'm kind of, giving it my own flavor. I'm not worrying about how she necessarily placed the blocks. All my blocks are similar, but they're not the exact measurements that she used. So feel free, make sure you check those things out too if you want to know more about the Bloom quilt. All right, so it's just time to turn all these shapes out. And I like to kind of turn them out just kind of roughly to begin with and put them to the side. And then I will grab my 2-point turner and turn them the rest of the way out. I've had several people comment asking me how I turn these shapes out so quickly, and I think that I'm just going to say practice. I've made several quilts like this at this point, and you just kind of learn what works and get your own little rhythm going. All right, so here's my 2-point turner. This is a tool by Clover, and it's one that Riley Blake and Lori Holt recommend using for these projects. And they are right, it works really well. If you don't have a 2-point turner and you don't want to wait to get one, you can also just use a chopstick or like a metal drinking straw. That would also work, but it's not going to give you quite as good of results, but it would get the job done. I also have, I don't know if any of you have the purple thing. I also have one of those. I haven't had the best of luck with the purple thing. I feel like when I'm turning these shapes and such, that I am pushing a little too hard for the purple thing, and it tends to bend on me. So that may just be, obviously that could be a me problem. Most definitely. All right, so here are all of our shapes. And you're going to see I kind of give this a little tug right there in those concave areas just to kind of loosen that stitch up just a little bit. Then when I go to press it, it will press nice and flat. And now I just have the shapes for block 14 to turn out. Switching back and forth like this, I have to keep my numbers straight in my head. Whew, you can see, it's not always easy. Took me a little bit to get that one going. And again, I'm just going to roughly flip these out to begin with and then come back and straighten them up with the Turn-It-All or the 2-point turner. I almost said Turn-It-All tool. If you watched, I think it was block 6 and 7. No, 5 and 6 maybe. I showed you how to use the turn it all tool to flip some flower petals out. And that works really, really well. All of these petals and leaves, you're going to see everything on them. So you can't snip the end and do that with these. But anytime I can, I definitely do. Just getting that pointy turner, that pointy end and those corners, pushing those out. Now remember, if you're not happy with your corners, you want them a little more crisp, you can use the stiletto tool and dig in that corner and pull it out. We have just a couple circles to go, and then we'll be off to the pressing board. All right, I will see you at the pressing board. Wow, you can really tell I need a new pressing cover on my pressing board, but whew, not gonna happen today. So here we go. All right, so block 13, I'm just gonna press my background, good. And then this block is in the middle. This flower is aligned in the middle of the block. So we'll give that a good press just to get that center seam marked. And then just like before, we're going to go ahead and use our Quilter Select Free Fuse. I'm going to give all of our shapes a good press. And actually let me grab my parchment paper and my Teflon mat just to protect what's left of my pressing cover. Wow, this fabric is not aligned very well. So I'm going to repress this to kind of make that a little straighter. Just because when I put this into my quilt, I want the design to be straight up and down with the words and everything. So sometimes you may need to do that if the printing on the fabric gets a little off, or maybe my cutting was off. One of the two happened. But that's okay, because remember, we cut our blocks bigger than we needed them. So we have the ability to adjust because of that. Just gonna put my parchment over that. Set my iron there. That stem set. Then we can do the rest of the block. I'm loving how this quilt is coming together. It's super cute. I'm very, very happy that I'm kind of getting this one off my to-do list too, to be honest. Kind of nice to know that I have one more quilt off the list I've been wanting to make. I'm going to put my leaves kind of angled up like so. And then I'm going to go ahead and put a little free fuse under there. I'm going to do this flower in stages since it's pretty big. Another thing I probably could do, well, no, we're going to do this in stages. If you try to do too many layers at once, then just from the heat of the iron and the free fuse, you sometimes run into some problems with it, like not sticking on that bottom layer. So that's why I'm kind of breaking that flower down. I'm going to do the big flower first and get it set. Then we'll add the circle. And then we'll add the smallest circle. And then we'll be ready to go. I have really enjoyed using the free fuse for this project just because it has really sped up the applique process. I'm able to go ahead and, sew my blocks or finish up my blocks, applique the shapes down on the machine as soon as I get done with the fusing. So that's super fun. Now I know some people will use a lightweight iron-on, and when you do that, you put the iron-on interfacing with the bumpy side down towards your fabric, so towards the right side, and then when you flip it out, the fusible side is on the outside when you flip it, and then you can just set your iron-on mat and fuse it down to your block. And that's definitely an option if you're looking for something like that to do. I just haven't ventured into that quite yet. I like the weight of the Pellon 30. So here's the first block that we'll be doing. Block 13. Can't believe we're on block 13. It's fun. All right, and here's our circles. Lots and lots and lots of circles. Hopefully you got some practice with those. Give this a good press. Now, if you're looking for the measurements on the stems for the flowers, make sure you check out Lori's blog. That information is not in the sew along guide, but it is on her blog posts. So you can go there and check it out. I actually went through all the blog posts way back at the beginning and wrote down on each block the sizes that I would be needing. That's kind of helped me speed up my process just a little bit. And again, I'm going to get that stem down first. I'm going to go ahead and actually do the top of the flower. And oops, I didn't press my shapes yet, don't I? Oh, don't let me forget that little yellow circle. I strategically chose the fabric for that one. I'm sure I'll forget. Now, if you need a little help lining up these circles, you can take them and just give them a little press, and then you have a line to line up the top and the bottom. That way you know that's centered on your stem. Give that a good press. I was fairly confident I didn't have any fuse out on my background, or else I probably shouldn't have set my iron down like that. Now on this, you can either eyeball it or you can line it up just like we did the other one. Or you can make it a wonky flower, just like purposefully offset them. That'd be super cute too. If mine's offset, that's what I'm going to say that my intention was. Always good to have a backup plan just in case you mess up. All right, and then there's that little guy. Go ahead and kind of place these down here. And I'm going to put the parchment over that because I know that I got some of that free fuse on the background with that stem. I do not want that on my iron. You can get it off. There's iron cleaners, and some people just use aluminum foil and run over your iron and it come off. It's not the end of the world, but I'd prefer not to have to do that. All right, so now here's block 14, ready to applique.
we're going to head on back to the sewing machine and get these appliqued down.
Well, I thought I was recording and I was not, so I apologize for that. We are back at the machine. I am doing the applique portion for these blocks. I am on block 13. I just have the stem and leaves done. I have 3 layers on this flower, so I like to start with the innermost shape and work my way out. I feel like I can keep the shape flatter and keep it from bunching and puckering. Sometimes if I start with that outermost shape, then I have some issues with it just kind of bunching up by the time I get to the middle. So I like starting in the middle and working my way out. I apologize for the part you missed. You didn't really miss much. You can go back to some of the previous blocks and just see how I did the stem. And I do still have block 14 to do. So you'll get to see that one too. When I'm going around shapes like this, I do like to try to stop with my needle on the outermost position for out. So like on this outside corner here on the flower, I like to be on the outside position of my zigzag. And then, so this next one will also be with the needle in the out position. But then when I get to this inside portion, I like to have my needle on the inside position. It just makes it a little smoother when you're turning. It makes the stitch look a little better. Trying to think what else I shared that I wasn't recording. Oh, it has been one of those days, you guys. Almost around the flower. And then we're just going to do that locking stitch. Cut it loose. And block 14. Alright, so on the stem, just like the other blocks that I've done, and just because I wasn't recording this, my zigzag stitch is set to a 1.8 width and a 0.9 length. Basically small. Play with that. See what you like. You may like a bigger or even smaller zigzag. So just play around with that, see what you like, see how your machine acts with it. I will caution you, there are a few places where you're going through so many layers of fabric that you just need to make sure you're taking it slow. And we have some of those on both of those blocks. And just like the other block, this one has a lot of layers here in the middle of this flower. So just remember that when you're going around, that you may need to lift your foot to turn. If you have a float option on your machine, then you may want to use that just to give your presser foot a little more leeway. Oops. It is cut. It just wasn't letting go. All those layers. And there are 7 layers there in the middle of the flower, because you have not only 4 layers of fabric, but then you also have 3 layers of interfacing. Now I have heard some people, after they turn their shapes out, they cut some of that interfacing out of there to reduce some of the bulk, and that may actually have been a good idea, especially on these flowers. But it also kind of gives them a little dimension, a little depth, I guess. So I kind of like that kind of a puffier look. So it just kind of depends on what you're going for and, what you and your machine can handle. We have one more circle, and then these guys can be pressed and cut. All right. Press them, trim them, and we'll show them off. All right, so I have my blocks pressed, and I've actually cut out block 14, but I want to go back to block 13 and show you what I'm going to do for it, because remember when we were pressing the fabric for this one, I mentioned that the lettering was like not straight with how I cut it. So I pressed it so it would be straight, right? And so now what I want to do is I need to line up my ruler on those lines. So I know that the center of my stem should be at 4 1/4, and so should this top one. And so you can see that the outside edges around my block are not even all the way around, but I still have plenty of space because we cut those blocks at 9 1/2 and we need to trim them down to 8 1/2. So you can adjust however you see fit. I'm going to go ahead and move this down just a little bit more just because I can, and make sure I get my stem all the way to the bottom of the block, because remember, I want to do my stems in those seams. So I'm going to hold this down and cut around my block. This is another reason why it's so beneficial to cut your backgrounds a little bigger than you actually need them when you're doing these applique blocks, because then if something like that is discovered along the way, you can correct it. So now when you look at my block, you would never know that that background was cattywampus originally when it was cut out, and my words are basically straight at this point. So there you have it. We have block 13 and 14 done for the Bloom Quilt Sew Along. They're both pretty straightforward blocks, nothing too tricky about those. One of the tricks that I shared with you is just how to get your background fabric a little straightened out if it's wonky when you've cut it out originally. And then also just practicing those circles. You know, that just comes with lots of practice. There's really not that huge of a trick to them. But it definitely will take some practice. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial or this part of our sew along for the Bloom quilt, and I hope you will join me again next time, because we'll be doing block 15 and 16 and getting row 4 together. So before I leave today, I'm going to pan out and give you a look of the first 3 rows. Oh, there's the Sheba. I'm going to give you a look at the first 3 rows of the Bloom quilt, and you can see where our progress is. Okay, so here we are with rows 1 through 3, blocks 1 through 12, and 13 and 14 are just kind of hanging out over there for right now. As soon as I get the next 2 blocks for this 4th row done, then I'll put them down here, lay out my fabrics, and have the 4th row of the quilt done. So it's getting pretty exciting. We are getting closer and closer each time, and soon enough we'll have a whole quilt top together and be ready to quilt it. So thanks again so much for joining in. Thanks for liking and subscribing. Thanks for sharing out. I appreciate you watching, tuning in, and just encouraging me and everyone else to just keep going with this quilt. So until next time, happy stitching.